We're on a mission from God.
And now for something completely different.
Let's get ready to rumble! Yeah, baby, yeah!
This is Pastor Jolly John Lekumsky.
And this is Pastor Matt Youngblood Clark.
And this is Wrestling with the
Basics.
Basics. Yeah, see there, right there, the fact that Matt and I have trouble coordinating our voices, that should actually be a comfort. That should be a comfort for our listeners. I don't know if they probably do, Matt, because we have very, very sharp people that are up on all the latest events. And the thing is, Matt, the cutting edge, thank you. The robots are taking over. And they've been doing it for years. A lot of people lost jobs because robots came and the factories were automated. Even in our homes, robots are washing our dishes. They're sweeping our floors. But the radical thing that has happened in just the last few months is the arrival of something called Chat GPT. Do you know about the Chat GPT, Matt?
The Chat GPT? I think it, John.
Chat,
I think it's,
yeah, Chat.
I think it's Chat GTP.
Oh, yeah. You're right. Yeah, Chat G. So whatever.
Who don't know who this Chat
this
guy is?
Well, I'm sorry. I don't know why they couldn't make simple names. What G? I don't even know what GP. Whatever it is, it's a computer now that can simulate human language and human communication. You ask it a question, and rather than saying go search some website, it will actually answer your question in natural, very, very normal sounding speech. And what they're doing is they're combining this now with this new deep fake technology where they can take just a few minutes of your voice recording and they can duplicate what your voice sounds like. Well, anyway, to finally get to the point, you will not know anymore whether you're actually listening to a real human or whether it could be some computer generated material and voice that you're hearing. And I just wanted people to know, in Wrestling with the Basics, we will always be a human broadcast. We have no robots here, right, Matt?
That's right. It's flesh and blood. You're stuck with me and John.
Although, Matt, it just occurred to me that if we had been taken over by robots, isn't that exactly what the robots would say?
Well, that's true. That's true, John.
So I don't know how are we going to prove to people that we're not a robot, because it's that good now. Well, I know, Matt. When you go on the webpage and you're trying to log into some website,
sure.
There's a little box that you check. I'm not a robot.
Yes.
Okay, so people, let me assure you that Matt and I, we always check that little box, don't we, Matt?
We do. I do. I always do.
Okay. All right, so don't worry. This is a total human. In fact, I'm thinking robots would not stoop so low. That's how you can be sure that we will always be a fully human, because robots would not stoop so low as to do Wrestling with the Basics.
You will receive the same quality of programming here on Wrestling the Basics that you're accustomed to, just to show we are not robots.
So thank you, man. So that'll be the sign that the robots have taken over. If the program seems to have a higher quality, then maybe they've taken over. All right. We really need, before the robots do come and take over, just for this, because we've become so stupid, we're doing the Beatitudes, Matt. You love the Beatitudes, don't you?
What's not to love in the Beatitudes?
Exactly. And so 2 weeks ago, we gave you some of the Beatitudes, and we started in the middle, and we talked about the promises that God makes in the Beatitudes. So do you remember it all? I know it was 2 weeks ago, and you're a busy guy. You've preached 2 or 3 sermons between them. Do you remember any of all the promises that God made to us in the Beatitudes, Matt?
Yeah, so I think we started in the end, didn't we, John? Didn't we kind of start from the back, and we were working our way forward?
Yeah.
So things like blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. For theirs is the kingdom of heaven.
No. We didn't do that one yet, Matt.
Oh, we didn't do that one?
No, sorry.
See, a robot would know that, John.
Exactly. If you had talked to Chat GPT, you would know exactly what we did the last
Chet
time.
would know.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I'm sorry to keep putting you on this, Matt, but the fact of the matter is I realized I didn't have the right sheet opened up on my computer. I was trying to play for time.
Stalling. Well, blessed are the peacemakers, right, John? Blessed are the peacemakers.
No, we didn't do that one either.
You didn't do that one either.
No.
Well, which ones did you do, John?
Okay, well, I'm so sorry. we started with
in the middle.
Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. That's where we started. And of course, the promise there is if you long for righteousness, if you realize you're not the righteous person should be, you will be satisfied. And the word there means to be completely full and fattened. It's not just that you get enough, but you got like 12 basketfuls of bread and fish left over. And the other one was the meek shall inherit the earth. And we talked about how the word there is the humble. And I'm more convinced after thinking about it the last 2 weeks, Matt, that the earth there actually should be the land. That it's a reference back to that Old Testament promise that the people of God would inherit the land. And you know why the other evidence I came up with? In the end of Deuteronomy, Moses is speaking to the people, and Moses said, God humbled you. He made you meek in the wilderness. And I thought, well, of course, see, that's the whole point here. Just like God promised them this land, so he's promised us this land. Getting there, we might end up being humbled. In fact, we might, and we will. But the land is ours. Then the one that is, of course, a great comfort to you as me as pastors, because we deal with this all the time. Blessed are those who mourn, and what's going to happen to them?
They will be comforted.
Yeah, and again, we talked about the fact that the word comfort there doesn't mean just kind of touching somebody on the back and saying, oh, it'll get better. But it means like it says in Revelation 21, where it says, he will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall they be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore, for the former things have passed away. So that's what God's going to do. It won't be just that it'll get better, but there won't be any reason to weep anymore, because God's going to take care of all the things that make us mourn. And now, finally, the one that I didn't get to, Matt, which is verse 3. Do you have your Bible open, by the way, Matt?
I sure do. I'm ready to go.
All right. So here's the first beatitude, and then I'll tell you why I left it to the last of the study. What's verse 3?
Okay, so verse 3, the first of the Beatitudes, blessed are the poor in spirit, theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And
the reason I've left this to the last is because it's the same promise that will be made at the end of the Beatitudes, that it's the poor in spirit who get the kingdom of heaven. Professor Gibbs at the seminary, Dr. Gibbs, would point out that we hear that as a place, right? The kingdom of heaven, it's a place. Mm-hmm. But really, the sense there in the Greek is that it's a reign. It's where God's ruling, where God's in control. And it's interesting, you wouldn't think the poor in spirit would get that. You would think it'd be the strong in spirit. And yet the testimony of Scripture is, no, that doesn't work that way. Remember Peter, when he thought he was so strong and he boasted, oh man, I'm going to go to prison, I'll die for you.
Oh yeah.
And yet at that point, he really wasn't part of the reign of God at all. In fact, Jesus has to turn around and say to him, oh, get behind me, Satan. You have on your mind the things of man, not the things of God. So it is actually for those of us who do have our times of doubt, and we do see that we are weak and that we do things that we know we shouldn't be doing, and we feel those lusts and those angers and selfishness in our heart. But that's the promise, that we're going to be the ones that God will reign over. And the other thing I wanted to leave this for is because everything else has kind of a future sense. They will be comforted. They shall inherit the earth. They will be satisfied. But what's it say here about the reign of God?
Yeah,
for
if
the poor in
there's
spirit?
is the kingdom of heaven, there's is the reign of God. It's in the present tense.
And, that was the big point you made 2 weeks ago when we were doing the Beatitudes, Matt, that, what's the phrase? Not yet. What?
Yeah, now and not yet.
Yeah, that's the phrase, which means what, Matt?
Yeah, so when we think about this is ours now. So, and I love that idea of reign of God. So it's not geographic. It's not like some kingdom with borders and boundaries like we think of kingdoms today or nations today. But no, this is the reign, the rule of God. It's ours now, but it's not quite fully realized yet. Jesus, for instance, he ushers in that reign of God with every blind person he restores sight to, every deaf person that can hear, he overcomes the effects of sin and the work of the devil. The reign of God is ushered in. And the reign of God is in our lives today, right? Every time that God is at work through his word, through the sacraments, breaking through sin, breaking through the works of Satan, we see the reign of God. I think of when we come to worship, boy, we really get to see the reign of God at work. So that's ours now. But we also know that this world still stinks. There's still sin, and the devil's still at it. So that
did you say the world stinks?
It
did you
stinks,
say that?
John. It does.
Okay, all right.
I know the robots are taking over. People are acting crazy.
Right.
It's yeah. Since the time Adam and Eve sinned, it stinks. But that full reign of God will come when the not yet part of it is when that full reign of God comes when Jesus returns, right? And so now, wow, his reign is over all things for the rest of eternity. So now, yeah, but yes, not yet. Yeah, exactly.
And I like what you were saying there. You were talking about Jesus healing the blind and the sick, and what we forget is he's doing that today. You and I, as pastors, can give testimony to all kinds of people who were in very difficult situations, physically, spiritually, mentally, and they got better, and Jesus healed them. But see, that's the thing. We think it was the doctors, it was the medicine, it was the counselors, and of course it was all those things too. But where do those things come from? Those are the means. Those are the gifts that God provides, that Jesus uses today to do these things. There are miracles happening all the time. If you can only realize the fact that it is a miracle that you and I have something to eat today, because the way this world is, it's amazing that there's any food out there. But yeah, of course the problem is, Matt, we also still see all the troubles and the trials and the struggles, but we forget that's the way it was in the days of Jesus too. He didn't heal all the blind. He didn't heal all the crippled. Even as he was raising someone from the dead in one city, we know there were other fine people that were dying who would not be resurrected until we all will be resurrected, as you said, at the end of the world. Well, so anyway, those are the promises, people. If anybody's out there mourning, if anyone feels they've been humbled or they're hungry or thirsty or they're just feeling poor in spirit, please understand, no, you are precisely the one to whom God makes these beautiful promises. And then I think what happens, because you were alluding to this already, in verses 7 and following, is we get a description of what now is going to happen to us, how all of these promises are going to change us. So let's just have a look at those if we could, Matt, starting with verse 7.
Okay. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy.
So when you begin to understand that God's going to comfort you, he has this land that you are going to inherit no matter what, and that in your hunger and thirst, he's going to come and say, hey, you're forgiven all your sins. Your thirst is satisfied. Your hunger is satisfied. Eat, take drink, my body and blood for you for the forgiveness of sins. Then that changes us. Then we start showing that same kind of love and mercy to the people around us, even as we have been shown mercy. And I think it's the same thing in verse 8.
Yeah, verse 8. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God.
And I think it's interesting because it's pure in heart, not pure in our flesh. No, we all still struggle with all the same sinful things that everybody in this world struggles with. But at the same time, we know that in Jesus Christ, as we've said, we are totally and absolutely forgiven. There's nothing left for us to do. Our sins are just as white and pure as they possibly could by the blood of the Lamb. And what's this see God business, Matt? But see the whole land thing, inherit the land. That's an Old Testament thing. What's this see God though? Does that have an Old Testament connection?
Yeah, I think when I think of seeing God in the Old Testament, it's something that really doesn't happen, right? To see the face of God, we're not worthy to see the face of God, and yet in the Old Testament we even hear. My mind goes to the benediction though too, in number 6. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you or lift his countenance upon you, depending on how you translate that. So, by God's grace, by his mercy, he looks favorably upon us. And we're able to, we're blessed. We're blessed by his countenance, his face being lifted upon us, all by his grace and blessing.
Boy, that's a great reference, Matt. That I had never thought about that. But yeah, so the whole Bible goes through this whole big business about, no, Moses, you cannot see me. You can only see my backside. And nobody wants to go up to the top of the mountain when God's on Mount Sinai. Mm-hmm. And yet you're right. The key blessing in there is that the face will shine upon you. And it actually says that the English wants to change it because that's what our teachers told us, not to be repetitious. Yeah. But in the Hebrew, it's the word face twice in that Aaronic blessing. And of course, that's the point. We couldn't see God. We couldn't stand in God's presence with our sinfulness. But now that we have all these things we talked about, all these promises that God made, which are all summarized in his forgiveness, well, yeah, we actually will be able to see God, and while it's only by faith now, we do. We see him every time we go to church, don't we? We see him in the baptism and in the supper and in the Word. Anything else about those two passages you want to say, Matt?
Yeah, I think, just as we talk about the pure in heart, like you already mentioned, John, I can't help but think of, again, worship. And so oftentimes in our offertory, we sing the words of Psalm 51, right? Create in me a clean heart, O God. And that's our prayer. And he answers it. And even in worship, we receive the forgiveness of sins. We receive that pure heart, that clean heart. And having been forgiven, now we can, see God. We see God at work, like you said, here in this world, but again, that not yet element when we are completely only saints, right, without sin and in heaven and at Christ's return. Boy, then we will see God face to face. I mean, that's almost incomprehensible for us, but we look forward to that too in the not yet of the Beatitudes.
So as we talked about 2 weeks ago, all these promises about the comfort and the inheritance and the satisfaction and the kingdom, the reign of God, those are all in the passive. It doesn't require us to do anything. When we find ourselves in those various difficult circumstances, God simply says, this is how it will be. Okay, just trust me. This is how it will be. And now we find out, well, how is this going to change us in our day-to-day life? And we will now be more merciful. And we do realize now that even though we have sin in our flesh, we are pure in our heart. And then the final thing that is changing in us at this very moment, we're not perfect in this, and we never will be because of our sinful flesh. But the final thing that he promises is going to happen in terms of changing us is what in verse 9, Matt?
Verse 9, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God.
So what do you do with that, Matt? How have you handled the term peacemaker?
Yeah. Well, I think, when we think about, Jesus' ministry and certainly his followers, I mean, not literally bringing peace in terms of no more conflict in the world, especially, kind of a political conflict, just the opposite, in Jesus' ministry at times. But yet, I think this, to be at peace with God, the peace that comes with sin forgiven, the peace that comes with, being restored, even physically, I suppose, when with the reign of God, that sort of peace that comes through reconciliation between us and God and us and one another.
The word peacemaker, I found out, is actually a term that the rabbis would have used a lot. And of course, the rabbis would have used it. Then it would have been I don't know what the word is for maker, but it would have been shalom maker. Shalom
Oh,
maker.
yeah, sure. Yep.
Yeah, and like you said, shalom is not just a worldly peace. Shalom is this, it is the entirety of everything that is peace. Peace with your brothers, peace with God, peace within yourself. And this is what happens now. We don't want to bring division. We're not looking to bring separation and anger, but what we really want as Christians is we do want to bring this peace. And I don't know if there's any other way that you can bring peace other than letting people know about the true peacemaker, right? The one who does bring peace on earth, Jesus Christ, who came with one purpose and one purpose only, and that is to suffer and die, right? As he said, I didn't come to be served, but to give my life as a ransom for many. And certainly then we have the right to be called the sons of God. I'm thinking on a passage that you may have preached on recently where it says you got to be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect there. And the verses that follow these Beatitudes. And the comfort is in Jesus Christ. Yeah, we are the sons of God. Again, not in our flesh, sad to say. No, in our flesh, we still get angry. We still want to even the score, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. But in this new pure heart, this new heart that has been shown mercy, there is this desire. We want to people to be at peace with us, but more importantly, to know that they are at peace with God. And then comes the conclusion. If you want to read this verses 10 and 11 and 12, let's just wrap it up here as we're almost done with the show.
Yeah. Sounds good. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven, for so they persecuted the prophets who were before you.
And you'll notice again, theirs is the reign of heaven. Theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And I think it's also interesting when you get to verse 11, it's no longer just a general statement. It's not only just blessed are those, but it is blessed are you. Blessed are you. Yeah, so he's talking specifically about these disciples, because you remember that's where we began 2 weeks ago, that these were words not spoken to everybody, but they were spoken just to his 12 disciples. And they literally would have this fulfilled in their lives, wouldn't they, Matt? They literally would be persecuted and reviled and accused falsely. But I was wondering, how does that apply to us today? Because we're not persecuted today. I know a lot of people think that it's tough being a Christian today, but trust me, what we're going through right now can't really be called persecution, certainly not like it was for these men who all, except for one, lost their lives for their faith. But do you see any application then to this verse to our lives today? This blessed are you when you are persecuted.
Well, I think, I think, again, by God's grace here in the United States, at least, not imprisoned or jailed or our lives taken for following Christ. But I do think even within families, I think that some feel there's some persecution that comes with being a Christian, or there's, they write you off because you're the crazy uncle that talks about Jesus, So I think sometimes there's forms like that, right? And I think that Jesus' words gives us hope, even no matter what that quote unquote persecution might look like.
Well, and I think the thing is, even outside of that, the fact of the matter, even if we're not persecuted, we are still afflicted by the devil, who's like a roaring lion.
You bet.
The world does hate us. That's what Jesus says. And we have all of these things we struggle with in our own flesh. So yeah, there's still, I think that's the point. As a Christian, you're going to have problems. You're going to have troubles. In this world, you will have trouble, Jesus says. But the promise still remains. We still have the reign of God now, and we will have the completion of that reign in the future. So that's the thing. We are going to be blessed no matter what happens to us in this life. Well, thank you, Matt. No computers here. It's just Matt and John, and this has been Wrestling with the Basics.